Let me introduce you to one of the proud supporters of From the Hawkeye of the Storm, Iowa floor covering down in Bondurant. Now, for the last year and a half, you've heard me talk about this great company in the heart of central Iowa. They've got their tough core, click together, 4.5 millimeter waterproof vinyl flooring, great for you DIYers out there. But even if you're just a contractor or you need a different type of flooring, they've got you covered, whether it be tile showers, carpet. Give Iowa Floor Covering a chance to serve you better and serve your flooring needs. Visit them online at iowafloorcovering.com. That's iowafloorcovering.com, or you can give them a call at 515-379-7000. That's 515-379-7000. Thank you to Iowa Floor Covering in Bondurant. Pleased to be joined by the one and only Coach John Patterson. Corey Brady here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. We're coming to everybody live from Iowa City. Let me get the camera a little bit straighter here. You made the comment, Don, as we made sure we were all set. It looks like you've been windblown.
Yeah. It looks to me like I was sitting out in the crowd today and someone else was not.
Yeah. I think we know who played which role there. For those that didn't make it to the spring game, or I should say the spring practice, it's not formally a spring game. I don't think we drew the long straw as it relates to weather. Last weekend, it was in the 70s and 80s throughout the weekend, and it was about as bad as you can expect. And I mean, 40 degrees, windy, wind was out of the northwest. I think it kept some fans away. It was a difficult day for a spring practice.
Kind of reminded you of a nice November day for football.
Yeah. Typically this time of year, you're hoping that we can get some sunshine. The sun peaked out a couple of times, but not enough to really make a difference. But Don, we're going to be here at least for the next hour and a half talking what we saw and just kind of some overall observations. I don't know that we're going to gather a ton by reading between the lines of what we saw today. You know, as Kirk always brings up, it's one practice and it's a small sample size. You had guys out as per usual with this time of year, and especially at the end of spring ball. But I guess let's start with the topic most people want to address. And if people are new to the show here, this is a Hawkeye Hangout, so the phone line is open. If you want to call in, the number is 515-635-1601. It's 515-635-1601 if you want to ask Coach Patterson a question. But, of course, you can also do so by means of StreamYard. The link for StreamYard is in the description of our video. So, let's start with quarterback play. Deacon, Marco, we got Tommy Pahalski as a walk-on. I got something to ask you about as it relates to number 19. But Cade is not back yet, and it's clear you could see him on the field. He can hardly drop back. I thought just a little bit of a glimpse that we saw in small drills. He's not out there with 11 on 11, but the little bit of movement we saw from him, I thought looked precarious at best. He's got that brace on the knee, so we didn't get a look at him. But the two guys we did see, what were your thoughts on Deacon and Marco?
I do recall talking about Cade. I do recall Tim Lester mentioning, just kind of matter-of-factly, that he was within a couple of months of being released. So I don't think he's really going to be able to be very productive in May or June, maybe. But certainly in July, I think he certainly should be fine to go then, if not sooner.
Deacon is number one. He's getting most of the snaps against the ones. What'd you see from him? Did you see improvement? I know, again, small sample size. Everything we say has to be taken with a grain of salt.
Well, the disappointment is still there in some areas. One of the issues last fall, of course, was we knew that Deacon was not very mobile, and we thought, well, that's still going to be okay as long as he doesn't turn the ball over. We got to hang on to the fact that he's not going to turn the ball over. Well, as we know, that didn't work out well either in a few select games last fall. And as most recently, of course, is the bowl game. There was a couple of throws in that game that were they were head scratchers, I'll say it that way. And yet here was one today that was another head scratcher. It's not easy to never throw an interception, that's for sure. But obviously that's got to be a priority for Deacon. one of the things we've prided ourselves on is winning turnovers, and turnover margin is a good stat to have on your side, no doubt about it. But today there were, I believe, 2 balls intercepted. One was a horrible decision. I guess he just simply didn't see the defender. It was almost as if he was throwing him the ball. And then there was another tip ball that ended up getting, I believe, intercepted right off the shoe tops.
Yeah.
I don't recall exactly we don't have the benefit of instant replay, of course. And I don't know exactly where the fault might lie there. Whether it was more with Deacon or more with the receiver, I'm not sure. But that's a couple of balls that were a concern. And there was another play that concerned me, simply because you got to value the ball. And that was what certainly appeared to be a strip sack. A guy came in the backfield and simply swatted the ball out of Deacon's hands. And I don't remember what happened. Maybe they blew the whistle. Maybe they called it a sack. But the bottom line, of course, I'm sure the quarterback coach would say, listen, you have to value that ball, and you gotta keep that thing firmly gripped into your hands, 2 hands as long as possible for that matter. The ball got swatted out. That shouldn't happen either. So those are all concerns. Ball security is something that Deacon has to give us. And today we've got that same concern about ball security. And one other comment I will make, one concern I had last fall, as you know, Corey, was throwing accuracy. It's not easy to always be on target with the football, but the best quarterbacks certainly are on target far more than all those other quarterbacks out there. Right now, he's not in that accuracy category of where we'd like for him to be. Simply balls not being on target. A ball that's a little bit off target, it's a little more difficult to catch, more likely to skip off of a receiver's fingers. And we know what happens to tip balls. They invariably end up in the wrong hands. So those are all, I'm sure those are going to be priorities for Deacon over the summer, because we simply have to do a better job of protecting the ball from a QB standpoint this fall.
A couple of comments here, and I do have some things to add to that, but Tyler brings out a good point, valid. Got multiple quarterbacks from the portal last year, Cade and Deacon. Right now, they are number 1 and number 2, assuming Cade's healthy. Marco just got here. Everybody else leaves. The guys that have left, let me just go on this rant for a second. The guys that have left, Joe Labus is now at Central Michigan. I've not heard anything. Maybe he'll end up being a great quarterback for Central Michigan. Deuce Hogan went to Kentucky, never earned a scholarship, ended up re-entering the portal. Carson May goes to Wyoming, then ends up re-entering the portal. He doesn't have a home right now. Alex Padilla went to SMU and was buried at SMU. Like, at some point, what Tyler just said, like, we just have to be comfortable saying quarterback development and recruitment has been so bad over the last 4 to 5 years. And maybe I'll be the one to make that statement, Don. You don't have to agree with the severity of that, but man alive. The fact that we're where we're at is not you've got to be patient with Tim Lester, because he's sort of inheriting a mess.
And I do think Tim Lester knows a lot about how to coach quarterbacks.
Absolutely.
So I think our quarterbacks are in the right hands, and there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to continue to learn. It's just a race against the clock. Tim mentioned the other day, 85% of the offense is in. Obviously, that's a crash course to get 85% in over those first 14 practices and day 15, practice 15 being today. So obviously, a lot of these plays that are installed simply haven't gotten a lot of reps yet. And I know they are keeping track. This play's been run 10 times. This play's only been run twice. Obviously, the one that's only been repped twice is not going to be as game ready as the play that's been repped 10 times. So it just takes time. We're definitely a work in progress on offense. I'm still very optimistic that the plays that we will be running this fall in games are going to present more problems to the defense than what's happened in recent years. That's a plus. That's something we can be excited about seeing. and that's a quick summation, I guess, of where we are. I think we're on the right track with our offense. We are going to present more problems to a defense this fall than we have in recent falls, and that's a good thing, because that's going to give us a chance to be more productive on offense. The bad news, I'm still concerned about how many explosive plays we're going to be able to generate. You didn't see many balls go way down the field today.
Did we see? Well, we saw one from Deacon.
Right, to Weegham.
It was a good throw.
It was a good throw. It was close to being a good play. Couldn't quite connect on it. And we had, I think they were with the threes, though, I believe. A deep ball that was dropped, and another deep ball that was caught, I guess. But it was 3 versus 3, so we really shouldn't count that. Unless it happens against our 1s or 2s, it's probably got limited value.
Jen, thank you for reminding everybody. Please, folks, just take a second to scroll down, like, I don't even know how much, but just scroll down right below the video. Just hit that like button. It does help us in the algorithm. And, of course, tell your friends if you haven't already done so. Share the show out on social media. It's a treat to have expertise like Coach Patterson. And especially with this new offense, Don, I'm going to rely on you as much as I have ever this season, because this is a new system to a large extent. And I know the defense, Phil Parker and some of the players have talked about how, we're seeing a lot of the same stuff, but can you kind of put into words, layman's terms for people? I know you only got one look at this. Some average fans may look at what we saw today and say, I don't really see much of a difference. What did you see that's different with this system as opposed to what we've seen in past springs?
Well, you saw more set changes today. By set changes, I mean oftentimes we start off in one formation. We typically use motion to create a different formation. We had significant amount of misdirection today. You saw some misdirection that was helpful to us and good to see. I think, and you've read more about it than what you saw today, maybe. I heard someone say in one of the practices, 60 out of 67 snaps involve motion. We didn't always see motion today, but motion in general, Coach Fry used to refer to it as window dressing. Oftentimes it isn't window dressing, but sometimes it's critical to the play. You're absolutely looking for a certain reaction to the motion, and if you get the reaction that you anticipate, then you're making them very vulnerable to a certain aspect of your offense. And other times it's simply there just to kind of confuse the issue a little bit. I do feel that in general, defensive players, if they're required to do more thinking prior to the snap, that's a good thing for the offense, because sometimes their thought process is not valid, and that's how you end up with assignment bust. You're a little more likely to get an assignment on defense if you have to challenge them first with motion. And we saw quite a bit of that today, and I do think that that's a good thing. I do wonder, we didn't really, officials were there, but we didn't really consistently start the clock at the right time. And I don't know if maybe we were slow in that we would have been charged with delay or had to burn timeouts if it was a true football game, and today was not. I don't know that I didn't really pay much attention to the play clock, but I don't know that it always started it when it should.
I wasn't paying attention to the clock. I know that one thing we noticed, a couple of procedural penalties. I think maybe first half of the session. I'm trying to remember when those were.
They were simply ignored, you mean?
Yeah, look to be ignored. I don't know how keen. I don't even know where these officials come from. Are these Big Ten officials? I had somebody ask me that in the press box. I don't know where these officials come from for spring ball.
I would suspect that all the guys out there officiating are going to do some games in the Big Ten this fall.
Okay.
I couldn't help but notice that John Breeze is one of those officials, one of our old players, and John's an umpire, and I think he was already an umpire in the Big Ten. I'm not sure of that. But he was one of the guys working the game today. And I was looking for other people like Robert Smith, who's a Big Ten official. Didn't see Robert today. I think Robert's worked spring games some in the past. It simply might not have been convenient to Robert to be able to help us out today. But the bottom line, I do think you didn't see flags flying today, and that was simply because maybe the officials made the coaches aware. I would have flagged number 78 on that particular play. I just want you to know, Coach, that would be ruled as a foul. Maybe there were some of those conversations between officials and coaches. After all, the coaches were on the field, and I don't doubt there's communication between coaches and officials even in the course of the practice.
Kirk didn't make any negative remarks about the officiating post-game, so that's a good sign, I guess. So here's the deal, folks. We're going to have Tom Kaker. It's going to hop on in a few minutes because Tom is en route back home to his home in the Quad Cities. But I want to get his confirmation on a couple of things. What I did, Don, from my perspective in the press box, because, yes, I stayed warm in the press box today, I tried to go through and actually kind of do an inventory on the roster.
Yep.
And I want to confirm some of this with Tom. Of course, we can't go through 1 through 99 with Coach Ferentz. Well, more than 99, but I can tell you a few that are confirmed to have been out. A few guys that were not on the field today. Jamari Harris, we talked to after the practice concluded. He was in casual clothes. Talked to him on the field. He expects to be back here in the next month. It sounds like he's pretty close right now. I think some of that's precautionary with an older guy who's been through this. Kyler Fisher, talked to him after as well. He was not suited up, but he is back in the mix. I'm anxious to get your perspective on where you think he could potentially fit in, maybe a leader on special teams. He's been really good for LeVar's unit. Cohen Intranger was out today. We mentioned Cade McNamara, who's extremely limited right now. Logan Jones was out, but he also spoke to the media. Jennings Dunker is out. Addison Ostrenga is out, and Y.A. Black out. So those are some pretty big names, but you're going to have injuries this time of year. I didn't notice a lot of other names or people that were missing that were real notable, or a few guys that I want to confirm with Tom and see if he's heard anything on a few scholarship guys. Another guy I don't have listed here is LaShawn Williams. We talked to him after as well, and he's getting there, but he's out for the time being. Would you say those are probably pretty normal as far as numbers at this point?
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying too, Corey, that these guys were out today really more from a precautionary standpoint.
Yes.
Maybe if it would have been a Big Ten game day, they would have played. Let's face it, Logan Jones and Dunker, those old linemen, they played a lot of football games already. It'd be foolish to put them out there if they were a little more likely to be more severely injured than what they are.
There are a few people that, again, I want to ask Tom about. I did not see Grant Leaper, the second-year tight end. Did not see Michael Myslinski. Again, maybe I missed him, so that's why I need to.
And the check mark simply meant you verified
that they were there and they were suited up. And I think there may be a couple of scholarship guys here on the other side as well. Tegan Davis is another one. Seth Anderson I did not see, but Kirk was asked after he is expected to be back, but he's missed most of spring. I think he missed most of spring last year. I had to go back and look. Remember, he transferred in beginning of that first semester, and I'm trying to think if I don't know that he got a lot of spring ball in last year. So he being out again is a storyline. And then Alex Moda, I did not see either from Marion, the young wide receiver. And Iowa needs wide receiver help. We can talk about Bostic and his departure. Why don't we do that as we're waiting for Tom? Jacob Bostic's already entered the portal. Don, yet another receiver biting the dust. I talked about it earlier in the channel. He's already got some offers. I mean, I'm surprised. Here's a guy who hasn't played. Now, he was a high 3-star recruit out of, I think, Palatine, Illinois, here a couple of years ago. Has been dinged up. He's a bigger body. Iowa State's offered him already. Pittsburgh's offered him. Vandy's offered him. I'm surprised for a guy who has not really played at all that he's getting this type of attention.
Yeah. You think about the obvious question is, why is he getting that kind of reception? It gets back to height and speed. He's got height, he's got length, and he runs well. Maybe not great, but he certainly runs well. I think most people would assess him as having good hands. So the only thing left, of course, is can he demonstrate that he can play with courage, things like that. I don't know that that's the case. He simply hadn't gotten a lot of reps. And, is he injury prone? He's had quite a bit of downtime, as I recall, since he's been here, due to one injury or another. But a lot of schools are interested in the receiver simply because he's got height and got a little bit of speed. And we've talked about this before, Corey. I think it's unfair to penalize a guy for being 5'10", especially if he can run like the wind. You better consider him because, as Coach Fry always famously said, you never weigh or measure a man when he crossed the goal line. And Tim Dwight got across the goal line a lot, as did Robert Smith, as did too many guys to count. Nemo Odoms comes to mind. I'm talking about guys we coached. Gosh, too many to count, really. Quite a few.
Jukio, thank you for the compliment. Appreciate you being here as part of the channel and asking the question about the portal. Does anyone know if I was actively looking in the portal at quarterback? Kirk was asked post-game. I didn't ask him this, but somebody else asked him about what he expects as it relates to involvement. It doesn't sound like Iowa. They don't have the scholarships available to take a headfirst dive into the portal.
Right.
And I didn't get the feel that Kirk feels they would need to anyways. I do think at certain positions they're going to. I do think they're going to go to the portal at quarterback. There was Cade Borid. He's an all-FCS. I believe he was an FCS All-American at North Dakota this past year. He was actually in the stadium today visiting. So
that's what position?
He's, I believe, a center. I believe he's a center, which brings up some question marks about where I was at, Michael Mislinski and Logan Jones and Tyler Ellsbury. But anyways, they're going to go to the portal, folks, because you kind of have to. I think every window you have to look and figure out how you can upgrade your roster. They need to cut down on scholarships. I think right now they're at 89 scholarships because, and I always lose count, guys start to leave, but they were at 92. You lose Caden Proctor. You lose Griffin Little, who was a medical, and then you lose Jacob Bostic this past week. I think that puts you at 89, could be 88 now if I'm missing somebody. And again, we'll get Tom on here in a few minutes, and he'll probably be able to confirm that. But Kirk talked, too, about in the press conference about how, you can't really look at trends to project how many guys you're going to lose because with NIL and the portal, everything's changing all the time. So you expect to have some natural attrition. And he kept saying, well, everything's going to work out. But how many guys jump in the portal these next couple of days? We don't know.
Well, the truth is it's kind of uncharted water. We really don't know exactly what the dynamics are because it's all new. And in that regard, the one thing we do know, we have to be down to 85. One way or the other, we got to get to 85. And we have needs beyond what our current roster is, but do we have scholarship availability to address some of those needs? And the answer is not to the extent that we'd like to have. Everybody has that same issue. There are guys on your scholarship camp that simply aren't ready to play. And that'll always be the case, of course, with younger players. Invariably, some of those guys require some time to be able to compete against guys that are 22 and 23 years old. It probably would help if you were maybe also in your 20s. Hard for a teenager to compete against a 23-year-old. But that's just the reality of the game. And if we're +5 right now or even +4, that's a little bit of a concern because obviously we'd like to go out and offer a few more scholarships to guys that we would love to bring in the program, but we still got to somehow get down to 85. And it's not going to be easy to tell some guys that have really done their job and done it well, and tell them that we simply don't have a spot for them anymore. That's tragic when you have to do that.
But you can tell guys, I mean, I would guess this is how Kirk handles it. I don't know this. You can tell guys, hey, you're buried. You're not going to play. We'll honor your scholarship, but this is the reality. And I think most guys, they want to play, right?
Yeah.
Now, what you don't want is a situation where somebody made a comment about this in the press box during the practice as well. Sometimes the guys that aren't the right fit for the program end up being the guys that are hardest to get rid of. I don't know if you found that to be true, but I'm not pointing anybody out specifically, but you go down through this roster, Don, you can probably come up with, well, you're going to be able to come, as far as scholarship guys, you're probably going to come up with 20 guys who aren't really going to see the field too consequentially this fall.
And you mean based on their eligibility, they should be in position to contribute, and yet they're not.
Right. Yeah. That's true as well. And so, I mean, you'd like to be able to say, well, these guys, they have to make the decision to enter the portal. Iowa did not have to honor Kyler Fisher coming back. They welcomed him back. They did not have to give Nick DeYoung a scholarship. They wanted Nick DeYoung back. Those are not situations they could have said, no, we don't have a place for you. Those were extra years of eligibility. So when those decisions occurred, I was a little surprised. I don't know. Were you surprised with either one of those guys, given the haul they have at linebacker and some of the struggles that we've seen from Nick DeYoung, that they would have those two guys back on scholarship?
I don't know exactly how the interaction went. I don't know how the conversation went. It's hard to know exactly how that transpired.
I can tell you, Kyler was asked after the practice, when did you make that decision? He said he knew early last season, like almost before the season started, that he wanted to come back. So, and nothing wrong with that. I mean, he loves Iowa. That's fabulous. It's great to have that leadership.
Absolutely.
But again, they are a bit up against the wall, so to speak, with available scholarships. So it'll be interesting to see how that transpires. Now, one thing that you do, and we talk about not trying to read too far in between the lines with spring practice, and that's understandable. And hopefully anybody that was actually at the game can follow that admonition. One thing that does tend to stand out at these open practices, Don, whether you're talking about the spring practice or Kids Day in the fall, is you're going to see the glaring errors. And I wrote down a few errors. One was when they were practicing red zone, you had a Jazz Patterson fumble. It was a lost fumble down near the goal line. I don't know how much, again, small sample size, but how much does a fumble in that situation during red zone offense, hurt his reputation with Liddell Betts in this offense moving forward for a running back room that's already loaded? I would guess they're going to lose somebody this portal window, because how do you retain Kamari Moulton, Jazz Patterson, Caleb Johnson, LaShawn Williams? That's a lot of guys that can't all play unless you deal with injuries, and that's just hard to predict.
Well, I think last year Liddell did a good job of using three running backs. There were a number of games where we had not just a second team back, but a third team back that got significant reps. And you've always heard me say that it's a real luxury to never have to play with a tired running back. And the only way to guarantee to do that really is to have three. If you only have two on a hot, humid day, those two might get worn down to the extent that you wish you had a third person you could rely on. So the fact that we have three that we know we have trust in, the three guys that played last fall, that's a good sign. I couldn't help but notice today Max White got a lot of snaps today. I don't know exactly if that's an indication. Is his stock up compared to the other guys, or is it simply a case of needing him based on injuries to others, needing him to carry the mail in that? In most cases, playing for the twos and the threes, of course, not for the ones. So it's a good problem to have. I was impressed with Jazz. He's always run hard, and he ran hard again today. And it's hard to get a measure on this. They didn't have any stats today, official stats, simply because people weren't generally tackled. It was what we call a thud practice. They were supposed to try to avoid tackling people. Sometimes in close quarters, it's hard for a guy to do anything other than go to the ground. But in general, it was hard to tell for sure if the guy was going to be tackled or not. You had a quick whistle and you got some idea of what the game would have been, but hard to really measure those stats. But regardless of all of that, I thought Jazz Patterson ran hard again today. He was the same decisive runner that he demonstrated in the past. And I have a lot of faith in him, and I'm pretty sure the coaches do too.
What would be your pecking order right now, without getting to see LaShawn this spring? What would be your pecking order with those four guys?
Well, Caleb is what I would refer to as a glider, or a slasher, you might call him. He's a guy, we talked about him. He reminds me of Eric Dickerson. That's a good thing. One of the things that makes him effective in the open field, he's a little bit of a long strider. So the way his feet are turning over, I think sometimes defenders misjudge him for how much ground he's eating up, and that gives him a chance sometimes to break off a long run simply because they underestimate his speed. That happens sometimes. The other backs are more typical of what you find in a running back, meaning shorter, choppier steps, good change of direction, making your cuts on the run. Certainly, maybe not quite as much of a home run threat, but certainly more than capable of making the first guy miss. And so often, as you know, a back has to make that first guy miss to be able to earn the kind of playing time he'd like to have. He's got to be able to get that done. So I think Jazz does a good job of that. LeSean does a good job of that too. LeSean also runs hard. If you wanted to just talk about determination in running the football, you might give a lot of football people that claim to be experts would maybe give them a little bit of an edge on number 2. I think they might say that both LeSean, let me get my numbers straight. That's right. Caleb's number 2, right?
Yes.
Yeah. They might argue that LeSean and Jazz are more physical runners, harder runners. They certainly carry their pads lower. They're not as tall, of course, as Caleb. They're different backs. They're a little bit different with their makeup, and as a result, they end up playing a little bit differently. But they all three have value, and I haven't even gotten to the fourth bag. And is that Moulton? Is that his name?
Yes.
28 maybe?
Yep.
Yeah. He looks solid too. I mean, we got a good problem at running back. We got guys that are in fierce competition. I guess your question, Corey, is can we keep them all? I don't know. It just depends on the relationship they have with their position coach. Can we sell them on the idea that they all have value to our offense, and maybe they have ST value also? Let's face it, we don't have number 3 returning punts and kickoffs now, and maybe one of those guys could provide value as a return specialist. I don't know that any of them field punts. Running backs typically do not field punts. More often than not, of course, it's wide receivers or DBs, it seems.
A couple of questions here in the chat, and folks, the call-in line's dead right now, Don.
We're not doing our job.
Maybe people froze to death at the spring practice. Anyways, the call-in line, the StreamYard link is in the description. I also threw it up in the live chat. And if we don't get any calls, we can just sit here and yammer. We could talk for 2 hours. But Tom will be with us here in a little bit as well. But the link for StreamYard, if you have a question, is in the chat. And you can also call 515-635-1601. But a couple of things in the chat that I wanted to hit. Bjork, yes. Don and I were both at the game. Don was in the stands. I was upstairs in the press box. So we both kind of got a different view. I like being in the press box. I prefer to be down there right on the field, especially for an event like this. But it's just so blooming cold that I would prefer to be out of the wind. But was able to see the whole field and get player numbers and whatnot. So that was a good thing. BJ says, I was not there today. Kirk said a QB missed a red zone throw by 2 feet. That should have been a touchdown. Yeah, that was to Caden Weegan. He says, which QB was it? I don't know. Was that Marco?
I believe that was one of the early throws. There was a throw early by Deacon. It was a ball that was thrown on the right, toward the right front pylon. Probably left. We were going to the south end. It was a ball that was thrown a little bit wide, maybe a little bit high too. That I thought that was a missed opportunity. I'm pretty sure that was an incompletion by Deacon. That's probably the one Kirk's talking about because it involved our ones. He'd be more likely to remember a throw that was off with the ones.
And we mentioned some of the glaring errors. So Jazz Patterson fumbles down near the goal line. You also had a blocked PAT after a touchdown for Marco Lainez. You had an edge rusher just come Free Willy.
Yeah, I was going to say, they got him off the edge, too. What we don't know, I don't know what the timing was on the kick. In general, we don't have an issue with timing. So I suspect it was more the fault of the edge blocker to give him that short edge.
And I mentioned the Carson Shire interception off of horrendous. I have that in all caps. Horrendous throw by Deacon Hill. And then there was another really bad throw to Jackson Rexroth. Really impressive grab by number 12, low at his feet. You could call it a pick six, of course. I mean, with somebody chasing.
And that ball, I believe, was tipped prior to that, right?
You could be right on that one.
I believe
you could be right on that one. Okay, and then let's see here. Leon says Deacon Hill couldn't start in the Pioneer League, let alone Iowa. Well, he did start at Iowa last year, Leon. Let's at least give him that. And Kelvin wants to know, has Lester improved Marco standing taller in the pocket and shortening his delivery and accuracy? Bobby made a comment earlier, Marco is bad. I think that's an unfair statement to make. I know that's the popular narrative out there right now on message boards. I'm not saying his arm is ready for Big Ten football, Don, but we've talked a lot about Deacon. What did you see from Linez?
Well, Linez is still the same elusive runner that he always was. We talk about being able to extend plays. You see that so much in the NFL now and in college too. They want quarterbacks that can make something out of nothing. And, of course, the only way to do that is to be able to extend plays. You got to be able to buy time with your feet, maybe just simply run for necessary yardage, or better yet, avoid sacks and then be able to get the ball downfield to a receiver that happens to be wide open. I do know this to be true. Quarterbacks that can scramble within the pocket or outside the pocket, sometimes defenders are really conflicted with how to react to that. And by that, I simply mean it's interesting to me that sometimes when a quarterback escapes pass rush, the eyes of the defenders sometimes end up on the quarterback to the extent that they lose sight of where a receiver is. And we used to simply explain it this way. Anytime we were in a flush situation years ago, we actually changed our thought process based on one particular game. I'll share it with you now. It was the infamous 1985 loss to Ohio State. We had 2 interceptions in that game. People might not remember this, but it happened this way. Twice Chuck flushed, was buying time, threw the ball twice to a receiver that was running across the field, parallel across the field. In both cases, the defender undercut that receiver. Right then, based on the experience we had in that game, we said, never again are we going to teach it that way. From that point forward, we simply explained to the receivers, listen, if the quarterback flushes, first off, you need to try to work open in the direction that he flushes. That makes sense, right? Because you can't very well pull up and throw all the way back across the field. We don't want you to do that because you're inviting interceptions. You simply can't tell what might be in the throwing lane at that point. So receivers are instructed, you work in the same direction the quarterback's flushing, and you got 2 options. You either break deep downfield, that's one option, or you start coming back toward the ball, back toward the quarterback, that's another option. What you do not do is work parallel, because to work parallel is to invite a pick, to invite a defender to undercut you. And so if you're working back toward the line of scrimmage, of course, you're going to effectively keep him on your backside and keep him away from the ball. We want you to do that. And yet, if you need a big play, don't be afraid to break deep downfield. And we had any number of touchdowns where a quarterback, I remember one time Mike Flagg caught a 50-yard touchdown pass against Ohio State. How does Mike Flagg get behind the secondary? Well, it was a flush situation. They lost sight of the tight end. And thankfully, our quarterback did not. I believe it was Chuck Long that threw that. That was at Ohio State. I remember it vividly. So, and we simply teach our guys this. Let's base it on game situations too. I'll give you an example. If we're playing and we're 2 touchdowns behind in the third quarter, and we have a flush situation, we need points. We're playing from behind. Quarterback, you should expect people to break deep downfield. Wide receivers, you're absolutely wrong if you don't try to open up downfield because we need a big play. And, of course, if they're both align with their thinking, you're much more likely to be able to hit those kind of plays. On the other hand, if you just need a first down to close out the game, don't even think about making a big play. Come on back toward the line of scrimmage. You always have an awareness, of course, of how many yards you need for a first down. I'm talking about a receiver that's running parallel, that's 10 yards downfield. We only need 5. Don't be afraid to come on back, and who cares if you only gain 6? That's okay. That's a safe 6-yard gain versus if you tried to just work parallel, a 10-yard pass that's intercepted.
Right.
So good receivers understand that, and the quarterbacks and receivers both are on the same page, and both are able to accomplish simply based on the fact that they know what the other person's thinking.
We've got a couple of people who are on hold right now to speak with Coach Patterson. Let's go to our phone line. Thank you for calling Hawkeye Hangout with Coach John Patterson. Who's on the line? This is who?
Jer. J-Yard.
Hey, Jer.
I got a question. Hey, I got a question for you guys. I watch you all the time. Good show, by the way, Corey.
Thank you.
Got a question. Hey, not problem, man. Hey, got a question. How do you go ahead and tell Deacon, he's good for the community. He does a lot of good things. He does a lot of proper things. But yet, he's probably not the quarterback for you. How do you evaluate between being a good person and being a quarterback?
Don?
Well,
they first of all, Jared, and I, I'm not this big advocate for Deacon Hill, but they need warm bodies right now because they don't have James Rezar in yet. Cade McNamara is down. They lost Joe Labus to the portal.
I get all that, but at some point in time, though, you got to say enough's enough. You know what I mean? He had a lot of time last year in games. He's had today. He didn't exactly put his best foot forward today. He had all last off season, and it kind of looked like the same situation, didn't it?
There are a lot of people that would agree with you. That's true.
And I think here's the one thing too. I think the way you go about that, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're going to tell me I'm wrong, Don. But I think the way you go about that, if the coaching staff has decided, all right, we're going to get Cade back. We're also going to get a freshman in James Rezar. We've got Marco, and we want to go to the portal. And we're not going to have 5 scholarship quarterbacks in the fall. I think the way you approach that is you sit down with Deacon and say, look, we are going to the portal to find a number 2 behind Cade, which means the best you can do is number 3. And we'll help you. We'll help, we'll put a good word in for you wherever you want to go.
Right.
I think you give him the opportunity because obviously he's loved by his teammates, and he gave them a warm body last year and during the regular season. I think that's probably how you approach it, right? From Kirk's perspective.
Well, I do think that Deacon must be a good teammate. You observe players on the practice field with how they interact. And I do think that Deacon's an outstanding young man. He's going to go on and accomplish great things with his life. One of them may not be to be an NFL quarterback. Maybe it will, because he's certainly got a good, strong arm. But based on his body of work up until now, I think it's safe to say the NFL is not excited about the possibility of drafting Deacon Hill. In his defense, he's still got a lot of eligibility left, and maybe he can get that done because he does have the ability to throw a football as hard as he needs to and as far as he needs to. Other things to
If
work.
he lost weight, would that help him?
Absolutely, it would help. I was going to say other things to work on. You got to be able to extend plays, and you are who you are. But let's face it. I remember one time, with Marv Cook. Marv Cook, a great football player for us, as you know, a tight end that was a Pro Bowl tight end. He was a consensus All-American in college. I remember vividly, spring before Marv's senior year, Marv asked me one day. I think I brought it up to him. Come to think of it, I said, "Marv, tell me how you feel about your first few practices here in spring ball." And he said, "Coach, to be honest with you, I feel like I'm a little bit sluggish right now." And I jumped at that opportunity. I said, "Marv, I'm glad to hear you say that because I think you're right." I observed the same thing. I think maybe 240 is a better. Maybe 240 is a better weight for you than 245 or 250. Now Marv ended up playing.
I was going to ask, what do you think the weight would be for him? 220, 250, or 250 and 220? Where would you like to see his weight at?
Well,
Are you talking about Deacon?
Yeah.
I mean, he shouldn't be anywhere close to 250, right, Don?
I don't know what he weighs now, but he's
215, 215.
Oh, 215. Yeah, probably 220, somewhere in there, right, Don?
Let's face it, some guys have more difficulty in cutting weight than others. But it's safe to say, it would be easy for me to suggest to Deacon, you're going to be a better player. You're going to have a better chance to satisfy our needs for you to play quarterback if you're a little lighter weight. I think that's a true statement.
Yeah.
And
okay, that's all I really wanted to know. It's just maybe we had to move on from Deacon. How would you, or what could he do to get better? Because it didn't look good today, and it certainly didn't look good last year.
Yeah.
Right.
Jared, appreciate your phone call, sir.
Not a problem, Corey. Have a good day.
Good stuff. Yeah, I mean, I get where he's coming from. There's a lot of fans that are like, I've heard people say it throughout the last several months. If Deacon starts, I'm not watching. And I think that's a little bit, I think that's going overboard. People just frustrated living in the moment. I don't think Deacon's going to be the starter. First of all, if Kate's healthy, Kate's going to be the starter. Now, as it relates to Marco Lainez, there has been a narrative out there over the course of the last, April? The last 5 to 6 months that he can't throw a football. He's a really good athlete, really fast, but can't throw a football. I didn't think he was that bad today with his arm. I mean, does he have the ball speed of a Deacon Hill? No.
Let me say it this way: I would relish the chance to work with somebody like Marco Lainez to help him to develop and become a better quarterback. Who has better arm strength? I think you got to favor Deacon with better arm strength. But let's face it, you heard me say before, Corey, it's not all about velocity. It's all about location. Part of Deacon's problem is that he's not as accurate as he would need to be. And for that matter, neither is Marco. Neither one of them have the accuracy that they need to be top-notch college quarterbacks. But I do think that Marco has potential to become a really outstanding quarterback. He's got more time on his side, of course, than Deacon does too. Obviously, the fact that he can extend plays is a plus for him. Deacon doesn't have that same capacity to extend plays and to buy time.
All right, good stuff. And a couple things here in the chat that I want to hit before we go to our next caller. Iowa Hawkeye Sports, do COVID year players count against scholarship numbers? Yes, they do. So they still have to hit 85 total. Bill, was Ben Keeter practicing? I believe so. Yes. Yeah, he was out there. He was in pads. I can tell you that. And then Lonnie, did the D-line have to pull up on every play like last year? And is Iowa hitting the holes faster? Well, quarterbacks are not getting tackled. That's the question.
There were times I remember telling the guy next to me it was a nice throw down the field, and I said, to be honest with you, I think that might have been a sack.
Yeah.
So I think there were D linemen that were maybe in position to make a sack that didn't have that opportunity today.
Did you notice anything with the run game? Like guys hitting, you mentioned Jazz being decisive, but did the run game look better? I know they're down a couple of their starters up front.
Seemed to me we were still a little bit inconsistent. There were times for sure when we had a running lane and it wouldn't be hard to imagine that would have been a gain of at least 5, if not 7 or 8. There were other times, of course, where we got stymied on or behind the line of scrimmage. So what you're looking for is consistency, and the fact that you got a couple of key players out, that's going to always present problems. And let's just not forget either that our defensive line in general is above average. In some cases, way above average. But so it's a good test for our offensive line. It seemed to me that overall you didn't have the glaring deficiency maybe that you've seen sometimes in the past. So it should be that way because, let's face it, we've got pretty good experience, pretty good longevity in our offensive line now. If we could have them all healthy at once, not hard to imagine that we wouldn't be improved, certainly from what we were a year ago. And
maybe if there's a silver lining to Caden Proctor doing what he did is that he did it at the beginning and not at the end of spring. Those guys aren't getting reps taken away. And furthermore, if there's any advantage, I think it's a bit of a disadvantage to Iowa having their spring ball go into the portal window. For some perspective, there are some teams that finish their Springs weeks ago.
Yeah.
So they're able to focus fully on the portal. If there's an advantage of having the portal window open when it did, is a guy like Bostic enters, and I know this sounds kind of cliche, but you don't have to waste snaps on him during that open period or during that last week. He's already in the portal. He's off the roster. He's gone. So, I mean, we assume he's gone. I mean, technically he could come back, but that's not going to happen, I'm sure. So anyways, if there's a silver lining with anything, and Hawkeye Howard asked about the offensive line, I think we kind of addressed that. But again, they're dinged up. And I mentioned, let's see, Dunker and Logan Jones. Is there somebody else that I'm forgetting on?
Didn't I see Feth on the bench too? Is he?
Oh, he's done.
He's done with his eligibility.
Yeah, he's done with eligibility.
I saw him down there, though, I think.
He may have been.
That's what confused me.
Logan Lee was there. Cooper DeJean, he was there as well.
Okay. Feth is done.
Yeah, that could be confusing.
Yeah, it was.
And then let's see. Everybody else played. Connor Colby was out there. Richmond was out there. Ellsbury was out there. Bo Stevens was out there. Chaplin was out there. Let's see. Cade Piper was out there. DeYoung was out there. I mean, I think that's pretty good as far as health is concerned at this point, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So, anyways, let's go to our next caller. We've got JT on hold. JT, welcome.
Hey, appreciate what you guys are doing. Question for coaches. I was just watching the film back. I wasn't able to make it down there today. And it seemed like Mason Richmond was getting pretty flat-footed. And it seemed like Brian Allen was beating him to the outside, and then he'd hit him with a jab step and undercut him and get inside of him. And then it looked like when Jack Dotzler, I believe it was running with the 2s or the 3s, he seemed like he was getting pretty tall. And at one point I watched a D lineman put his head over the back of Dotzler's head over the back of his own feet. Like, he got way too vertical. Which way would you rather coach? A guy who gets too flat-footed or a guy who gets too vertical?
Oh gosh, I don't pretend to be an expert on O-line play. I do have great faith in Kirk for his ability to bring those guys along, and for that matter, in George also. I think George. I know this for a fact. The players like George. I know that for sure. That may sound unimportant to you, but truthfully, it is important. I've always given a lot of young coaches have asked me through the years, give me some advice on how to be a really effective coach. And I've always reminded them of this. To be really productive as a coach, you have to have a minimum of 2 things in your favor. You have to be liked and you have to be respected by your players. And if you don't have both of those on your side, then you're in trouble. So I do know that the players like their offensive line coach. And I certainly have every reason to believe they respect him too. And that's important, because only then will they work hard to please their coach. And he certainly knows the technique of teaching O-line play. So I feel good about all of that. Looking specifically at those 2 players you talked about, I know this. If it's not easy to block an edge rusher, that's for sure. And maybe today, the situation you're talking about, maybe they were long yardage even. Now it becomes even harder. One thing you didn't see a lot today, I don't know how much long yardage we had. We certainly had some, but you didn't see a lot of draw plays in long yardage in general. In long yardage situation, we did throw the ball. Sometimes that makes you vulnerable to pass rush. And it's just all about matchups sometime. So, but I really, I didn't have the advantage of any replay at all. And I couldn't back it up on my computer even after the scrimmage was over. So I really don't know much at all about what went wrong with those pressures and those sacks. You're probably right. Which one's worse? I don't know. Neither one's good. I'll say it that way. Neither one of them is what you're looking for.
Awesome. Thank you.
Anything else, JT?
Nope, that was it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the call. Yeah, good question. Dotzler visibly struggled. I mean, there were several where he just got beat. And anyways, so What was I going to say? There was one other thing that wanted to add to the O-line conversation, but I'm sure that will get brought up when I know Tom's just a couple minutes out here. We got a couple more people here waiting on hold. Before we get to them, Jukio wants to know what quarterback out of the portal would you aim for if you had an opportunity? That's hard. I mean, they got you can't go get like Jaden Rashada from Arizona State. Like, you've got to understand that you're trying to get a guy who's going to maybe compete for the starting job, but likely is going to have to accept being a backup. That's hard to sell in the portal.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough situation that we're in. Let's face it. Imagine your job is to convince a quarterback that's in the portal that he has a legitimate chance to be starting for Iowa this fall by showing up in June or July and earning that position over the summer in camp in August. He has a chance to be our guy. Well, first off, so many quarterbacks are going to say, no, wait a minute. Cade McNamara is the same guy that took Michigan into the playoffs a couple of years ago. And you're telling me you're going to give me every opportunity to play ahead of him, and he's got 1 year remaining, and I've got 2 or 3. Why should I go to Iowa knowing worse yet, you've only got 1 left? Are you going to get a chance to upend Cade from his starting position? And the answer is it'd be hard to convince somebody that you were going to have a legitimate chance to get that done. So the only hope they would have is for Cade to falter in the game or to be injured. And nobody wants to play that kind of game, of course, in terms of transferring. So it's a tough sell. It's a tough sell to any quarterback that projects to be good enough to start for you. And another way to look at it, everybody has one good quarterback, but nobody wants to be the backup. Nobody wants to be the best backup in the country because you're still not playing.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
T. Hink in the chat says Cooper Lagasse, the Utah State quarterback that Iowa played against last year. I guess he's in the portal. I wasn't aware of that, but let's see. Iowa gives Spencer Petras to Utah State. Utah State gives Cooper Lagasse to Iowa. I wasn't all that impressed with Cooper Lagasse. He can run.
Don't remember much about him. Is he the one that took all the snaps against us?
Yes.
I do remember that Utah State put up some points.
Yeah, I mean, I think he
Didn't he?
hurt Iowa more with his legs.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. I have to go back and look at that game again. But anyways, good question, whoever asked that question initially. And let's see here. Kelvin says Kyler Fisher. So Kelvin Fisher says Kyler Fisher is a starter. I think Kelvin might be related to Kyler.
Might be.
I don't know. No, yes, he is sort of a starter, but when they're in 4-2-5, he's not going to be on the field because they're going to run a lot of 4-2-5 when you have DBs like Wampa and Schulte and Castro. They're not all going to be able to play when you're playing multiple corners, and I mean, you just can't. You're not going to play 3 linebackers at a time. So
Right. Yeah.
that's why I brought up.
Yeah, you're going to see a third linebacker versus 21 personnel, maybe 12 personnel. Certainly, if you have 2 tight ends and 2 backs, 22 personnel, as we call it, 2 backs, 2 tight ends, that would allow for only 1 wide receiver. What we call a flanker formation. Yeah. So we don't see a lot of that. You know, so much nowadays it's a lot of it's 11. Probably number 1 formation would be 11 personnel, 1 back, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers out there at once. It's going to be nickel defense in that case. And what we think of is our standard defense now with 2 linebackers, 5 DBs.
All right, let's go back to our next caller on our phone line. We've got James with us. James, welcome.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Good. So I didn't make it out there, but I seen a lot of stuff on Twitter about it. First question I have is, who was the 2, since Jamari didn't practice, who was the second person out there at corner? Because obviously Shangli is probably 1, right?
Yeah, so Jamari,
I believe TJ was out there.
Yeah, TJ was out there a lot. Let's see. John Nestor is getting a lot of ride right now. That's the type of question that we're talking about, who's running with the 1s and the 2s, that I'm not actively thinking about as I'm watching. I'm just looking at who individually is playing playing well. But that's a good question. I think probably you're based on what we heard from Phil on Thursday and then what Kirk said after the practice today. Your top 3 guys right now are Deshaun Lee, John Nestor, and Jamari Harris. Is that fair? And then maybe, after that, you talk about a TJ Hall. I'm just looking down the list here. I didn't see Jamison Heinz in uniform today. Not sure where he's at. Don't know about Devin Hilson. He was practicing, but it sounds like maybe he's fallen behind a bit. I think those are your top 3. Zach Lutmer's come on. He was talked about by Phil, pointed out specifically. But I think those are your top 3, James.
Yeah, it's just interesting to see, injuries happen during the year too. So you kind of got to, and I don't want to wish injuries on anybody, but we know, especially last year running back, we had a lot of injuries. At corner, we had some injuries too. So you kind of got to understand you need depth at those positions. Wide receiver does scare me. I think I told you this when I messaged you the other day, that wide receiver does scare me a little bit. I understand Bostic got pushed down, but it does scare me having 5 on the roster. And I know Seth wasn't there last year, but him not being there this year, I don't know to hold stock into that because he wasn't there last year. But
wide receiver should scare you.
Yeah, I mean it always does. But I mean, this year even more.
When's the last time Iowa's had a really good wide receiving core?
The wide receiver I trust was Smith, Marset, and Brandon Smith.
But that was 2019. That's 5 years ago.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying I could trust both of those guys, and maybe they're not going to catch everything, but I know you give it around them, they can play. They both had different styles. One's more of a playmaker, the other one can go up and get the ball. You kind of knew what you got from those guys. From anybody you have in this room now, you don't know what you're getting, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I will say today I was favorably impressed with Caleb Brown. Caleb had several catches today, and we always knew he was always good after the catch. The question was, could he consistently make those catches? And it appears to me, just based on looking at one practice today, maybe his ability to catch a football has improved. He certainly, to my knowledge, didn't have any drops today, and had a couple of 3 nice catches.
Real quick, I want to respond. John in the chat here, the comment I got up on the screen. Just want to make this is not accurate information that he just commented. He says it's the 3rd week of April, just 2 weeks of practice. They've been practicing for this is week 4, I believe. They're not practicing every day. But
right.
Let's see, was it?
They spread it out over 4 weeks, basically.
Yeah, it's this is week 4, so this is the end of the spring period. So, anyways.
But also, you had a whole sample size of Deacon Hill last year. So to say to move off of Deacon Hill is kind of something that I feel like is not a point of we've seen it all last year too. I get it's a different system, but you also seen him play quarterback last year too. So if nothing changes, then it's did you really progress? If that makes sense.
Makes sense to me.
When it comes to that message, you've seen him play 8 games did he play last year? Was it 8?
Something like that.
Yeah, 8 games last year. So that's a decent enough sample size for you to understand whether or not. But it'll be interesting to see. And obviously, I know we're going to lose guys in the portal, and I hope maybe they go to quarterback. I think the Ty Thompson not coming to Iowa, obviously, but I think that's something to look into. They were looking for another quarterback, so maybe that's something to keep our heads kind of on to. They did at least extend interest. At least they didn't get him, but they at least extended interest in another quarterback. So maybe there might be interest coming out there eventually.
Somebody brought up the Ohio State quarterback situation, and although I've said on the show and on the show with Mark Rogers that I don't have any reason to believe any validity with the rumors about Lincoln Kienholz at Ohio State, I think it's fair to assume that somebody's going to be entering here in the next week, whether it be Devin Brown or Lincoln Kienholz.
Will Howard could dig into if he doesn't get the starting.
If Will Howard enters, Iowa's not getting Will Howard.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying that was an into. But
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see, and I hope we don't lose anybody. I think I agree with you. The running back room, I think we'll lose anybody important, but the running back room, I think we'll lose somebody for sure. I just don't see 5 guys being there the whole season. It doesn't make sense for those 5 guys to all stay.
Right.
If that makes sense. But enjoy it, and I'm glad somebody could be there at least to give us some insight of what happened. And I'm interested to see what what he says. Not document. Who?
Kaker.
Yeah, Kaker. I knew it was one of them. I was looking at document tweets earlier. That's why I got his name stuck in my head. But I'm interested to see what Tom says about what happened and kind of who wasn't there and why they weren't there. That's kind of really intriguing to me. But
James, appreciate your call as always, sir.
Yep. Enjoy your night. Make sure to leave a like, everybody, so you can support Corey or everything he does for us as fans, and without Don, and I was gonna put Cash in this because she's been around recently. It wouldn't be as possible without them being around too. They give great insight. So it's always fun to have them and get the insight, the information questions that we have. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Jerry in the chat says, nice to see Reese Dakin punt. He had a really nice coffin corner punt today.
Yeah, I watched it. He had one bad punt today, the only one that I saw. Of course, he's only human, but in general, he reminds me a little bit of the last number 9. That's a good sign. It's not hard to imagine that over his career, because correct me if I'm wrong, he's got 4 years of eligibility left, right? He's coming right out of.
Yes.
He's not even as old as Torrey was.
He's 19.
Torrey
was
arrived.
24, I think.
Yeah. So he's got a similar frame, of course. Not hard to imagine he's going to continue to grow a little bit. And it's possible he'll end up being a draft prospect along the lines of Torrey Taylor someday. That's the realistic goal for him.
Erica Goldberg. Thank you, Erica. Miss having you on the show regularly. I know you're a big football fan, so good to see you here. Super chat. She says, why must it be assumed that Cade is QB1? Make him work for it, and if he doesn't want to, let him leave. He'll likely get injured too, sadly. Again, too, sadly. I've been fine. I agree. Right now, he's the incumbent, and we've seen Deacon Hill. If Marco doesn't get better, it's likely going to be Cade. If they go to the portal, though, like say they go get Lincoln Keenholz, who's a former top 150 kid, he's a South Dakota kid who was wanted by some schools that had a good reputation at quarterback, Ohio State, North Dakota State, Washington. Kalen DeBoer wanted him. Obviously, he's a prospect that should be able to give Cade a run for his money. Yeah, you don't just hand the job to Cade McNamara. I just think it's going to be a challenge to get a guy like that. I think they should try, but I just think it's going to be a challenge to lure someone like that.
Yeah, hopefully anybody that might want to consider coming here with the idea that do they have a realistic chance to play ahead of Cade, with a little bit of luck, they'll realize if they go back and look at some of those early season games, let's face it, our problems were not necessarily tied to our quarterback play, but a kind way to say it would be that Cade was not good enough to radically change our offense in those early games. We still struggled even when he was healthy. And think back to the Penn State game. I believe he was healthy for every snap of that game, and that was a painful night for all of us.
Marginally healthy. Remember he got dinged up in fall camp, and he was never really 100%.
Good point. He was healthy enough to play, but less than 100%.
Definitely, and that may have factored into getting re-injured. I know it was a different injury, but you've talked about not playing at 100%.
Right, and for that matter, even the previous year, of course, he was their quarterback for their entry into the playoffs that previous year. But even then, I would grudgingly say, if I was asked to give an honest impression of Cade 2 years ago at Michigan, he was a really good game manager. He was smart and he wasn't going to make many mistakes, and that's important. That's very important. On the other hand, I can certainly understand how JJ ended up moving ahead of him, because JJ simply was a cut above in terms of being able to extend plays and being athletic enough to be able to get out of a jam here and there. JJ is going to be drafted, I don't know, probably within the first 2 rounds, I think. Maybe in the first round, I'm not sure. But he clearly has demonstrated that he's worth the investment, because there are a lot of NFL teams that are going to be more than happy to draft him next weekend.
And I do see the question from JT in the chat about Ohio State. Well, he brought up Keenholz, but any Ohio State quarterback that would enter the portal, their season's over, the portal, or their spring season's over, the portal window is opened. None of them have entered yet, but the portal window lasts for another 10 days. So, there's a team that's loaded. Not saying Iowa's going to be able to tantalize a guy like that, but but they could still enter potentially here in the next few days.
Right about now, Corey, I'm wishing I taped Ohio State's spring game because I don't really know much at all about these quarterbacks.
Yeah. Well, they're all good. I think that's fair to say. I mean, they were all obviously, right. They got basically the number 1 and number 2 guys from the same class, Julian Sayin and other guy's name escapes me, but depending on what recruiting service you look at, they were 1 and 2. And then you have Will Howard from Kansas State. Yep. You have Keenholz, Devin Brown. That's a lot of talent, and they can't all play.
Right.
So, all right, folks, we've got Tom Kaker of HawkeyeReport.com set to join us in just a second. This, of course, is Hawkeye Hangout with yours truly and the guy that makes this all happen, Coach Don Patterson. We're going to take a quick 30-second break, say thank you to our sponsor. We'll be right back more with Coach Patterson, myself, and Tom Kaker coming up. Straight from the man cave, Kinnick Under the Kitchen. Authentic, original player artwork is being drawn up for Hawkeye fans everywhere. Locally made prints of stars wearing the black and gold from the past, present, and future. How about current Hawkeye superstars Cooper DeJean and Torrey Taylor? Legends of the past like Jack Campbell, Spencer Lee, and Tim Dwight. Plus future phenoms like Aaron Graves. There are so many options available. They make great gifts, and your purchase benefits the Hawkeye athletes wearing the black and gold. Visit Under the Kitchen on Facebook or at Under the Kitchen's new website. That's underthekitchen.square.site. Again, that's underthekitchen.square.site. Check out Under the Kitchen today and get your authentic, original Hawkeye print. Appreciate Under the Kitchen and Randy Engel for being with the show for as long as he has. We welcome now a good friend of mine who is also at the spring practice today from over at HawkeyeReport.com. It is Tom Kakert. Tom.
Gentlemen, how are you? Hey, Coach. How are you, Coach? Good to see you.
It's very good to see you, Tom.
Did you, Coach, did you give Corey some cookies? He was promised cookies today.
No. He never promised me cookies. I was asked, does Lisa make good food? And I said, the only thing I've had is her cookies, and they are really, really good.
Yeah, they're the best. and there are no fresh cookies in the house.
Oh, no.
Don ate them all before I got here, but he deserved them because, Tom, people like you and I were up warming the press box most of the practice today while Don was freezing his tail off. So
that's true.
See this wind burn on my face?
It was not pleasant. I fully admit that I bailed out and went upstairs after a while in the sun. I was like, it's not going to happen today.
Yeah. I said that Don began the show, Tom, that it seems like we can't get, I know the last 2 years have been just miserable weather, and it's just that extra frustrating for the fan base because this is a game. And I made this comment to Mark Rogers the other day, like this was a spring game or a spring practice, open spring practice. I would think would be really highly anticipated for the fan base because when's the last time we've talked about a real new offense?
Right.
And I don't know what the final count was, but it looked pretty thin, wasn't it, Tom? And I think a lot of
maybe 1,000 people on a good day.
That's
generous.
Yeah, that's being generous. There was. I could count on maybe 2 hands how many media people were in the East stands. Most people.
So, we used to term this as a friends and family crowd.
Yeah, I think there was a softball event going on down on Highway 6 as I was leaving, and I think there were more people in those stands.
Huh.
It looked like that to me, but I'm exaggerating a little bit. So, Tom, a couple things before I want to kind of do some housekeeping stuff with you. One thing that I tried to take advantage of being up in the press box this time as opposed to being down near the field is trying to get a tally. And I know people like yourself and Chad Leistiko, the Des Moines Register, do a great job tracking who's out there, who's suited up, who's not. I got a few people I did not get checked off my list that I did not see in pads. Obviously, and stop me if I'm wrong on any of these, we know that LaShawn Williams dinged up, talked to the media afterwards. He's expected to be back.
Yeah, sprained ankle. Sprained ankle is what he told me.
Okay. Jamari Harris, same thing. He's going to be back.
Yep.
He talked to the media. Kyler Fisher talked to the media. Logan Jones talked to the media. Jennings Dunker did not talk to the media, but there wasn't any indication from Kirk that that's real serious, correct?
No, he talked to us about a week ago, maybe. I think a week or two ago on a Tuesday or Thursday, and he had a shoulder worked on this winter, I believe. So he's fine. He said he told us he was basically close to 100%.
Okay.
But they were just going to hold him out there. There was no sense in throwing him back out there.
Addison Estringa?
I'm going to guess soft tissue based on the way he was moving. I think it was probably soft tissue, which usually means hamstring, quad, something like that. Is what when Kirk says soft tissue, that's where I always go.
Cold Bay does not help that.
No.
And then YA Black was not
off-season surgery too. I think a shoulder
that was mentioned. So a couple people that I don't have any notes on, and maybe you're able to tell me. So Seth Anderson's another one. Don't want to miss him.
Soft tissue. But
hopefully you get him back here in the summer.
Yep.
I did not see Tegan Davis.
He's still, I think, coming back from that. Last spring he tore up his knee pretty good. So I think they're just being extra careful with him.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Alex Moda.
He was on a scooter kind of thing, one of those one-legged things. He had his foot in a boot.
Okay.
So I think he may have broke foot.
So I don't know how you spot stuff like that. I have no idea how you see stuff like that.
I'm a nerd, is what it is. I'm a nerd about this stuff.
I'm just going to keep going on this list, Tom, because you're good at it. Reese Osgood.
Did not see him.
Did not see Reese, and then did not see Jamison Hines.
No. Didn't see him either.
Landon Van Kekerex, did not see him.
No.
Did not see Aiden Hall. Anything on Aiden?
No, didn't see anything with Aiden. No.
All right. Nolan DeLong.
That's a good one because he was making a bit of a push in special teams last year. So,
and then Jalen Thompson, the walk-on tight end, did not see him.
Yeah, I saw him down there, and he was in street clothes. So,
okay.
no boot on or anything, and he just looked like he was. Whenever they have a boot on or something, I always assume it's soft tissue.
Okay.
Quad, hamstring.
Grant Leaper.
Did not see him. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. Michael Maslinski. What do we have on?
I don't think I've ever seen him in uniform.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't laugh. That's really not right of me to laugh.
I'm kind of serious.
I know you're serious, and that's kind of how I felt about Jeff Bowie before I saw him on the field today. We finally saw
Jeff Bowie got in there working second team reps at D tackle today.
Yeah, how about that? Good for Jeff.
So,
I'm happy.
I was happy for him because he's never been able to stay healthy. But I think the same thing with Mike. Mike's never been healthy. I hope he gets healthy because I had high hopes for him when he came in.
Yeah, and writing on the wall, if they've got a chance with Cade Borred, he's coming in as a center potentially, right?
I saw him today in the stands. He was wearing a Hawkeye hat. So
yeah. I saw you. I think it was you or somebody in the media tweeted that out, and I'm like, well, doesn't mean he's going to commit necessarily, but it sounds pretty good. I don't know what Blair or your guys have said.
Yeah, I think he wants to come to Iowa. I'm afraid he might have to walk on them because they're just in such a scholarship bind, and they don't really need offensive linemen. He'd be kind of a luxury item.
Yeah. Okay. Let me see here. Luke Gaffney.
He was a guy that was working second team. Phil praised him the other day at D tackle. So that opened the door. That opened the door for like Jeff Bowie and Maddox Borchard and Johnson to get some reps on second team today.
And then I think the only other one I had was Andrew Krause.
Yeah,
no clue. I know I'm going down. I'm going through.
You're going way deep. I go about 75 deep on the roster. That last 40 plus.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm
what's also hard. What's also hard is there are a couple of guys, and I have them marked here, Greg Fagan and Devin Van Ness are both listed as number 38. They're both on defense. How do I tell the two apart? And then Cale Kolaric and Aiden McDermott are both DBs wearing number 26, according to the roster. So I don't know if both of them were there. They have too many numbers. You have too many players. You can't have unique numbers.
I saw Kolaric out there because he's working second team at safety.
What about, you sure that wasn't McDermott?
Yeah, because I've seen him before, so I knew it was him.
So anyways, that's kind of what I wanted to do as far as housekeeping. Was Luke Elkin snapping?
Yeah.
All right. I didn't mark him down, but I thought he was, and I didn't have him marked down. Okay.
Yep.
So anyways, Tom, that's kind of just to run through the roster. We've talked a lot about quarterback, and of course, Kirk talked about the position and maybe their potential approach to the portal.
I have some thoughts on quarterback.
I'd love to hear them.
I think what they're going to do is probably dive into the portal and try and find somebody, because you have to look at it from this perspective. Last 2 years, Cade McNamara has played 8 football games. He's gotten hurt both years. Season ended first half of the year. So, you don't want to wish injury on anybody, but you just have to look at it from a realistic standpoint that he's not been healthy all the time. And, well, Deacon, I thought, looked marginally better, and Marco looked marginally better. I've also heard that both of them have had their struggles this spring. Probably can't go into the season with that as your quarterback option. So I would think you'd probably look to the portal and see if there's anything in there. They're not going to take that kid from Ohio State, Kleinholz. They're not even interested in him. I don't know where those guys came up with that stuff, but I talked to the people that Don knows, and they're like, yeah, we didn't offer him out of high school, and we aren't going to offer him now, even if he went in the portal. He's not what we need. So, I don't think it's going to be him. Maybe one of the other Ohio State quarterbacks.
Well, I think the only other one would be Devin Brown. I can't imagine one of the freshmen leaving. And
I can't see like Aaron Noland or Julian Sayin or whoever, one of those guys. I think those guys will stick for a year at least.
And I cannot imagine Iowa being able to make a splash with Will Howard.
Unless Will Howard got beat out this spring. But I think part of the deal with him going there was Ryan Day probably told him, you're going to be our starter to begin the year.
Even then, Tom, I mean, Will Howard's going to have people throwing money at him.
Oh yeah. So Michigan, like the school up north, would probably throw money at him.
Yeah. That's why I kept saying, the social, I'm with you. I have no idea where those rumors got started, but if they were going to take anybody, it would have to be either Kienholz or Devin Brown. Now, I believe Iowa tinkered with Kienholz. I know they never offered him, but did they pursue him a little bit?
Yeah, he's kind of in the Iowa footprint.
Yeah.
Where you would recruit a kid from where he's from. They generally are going to kick the tires, but they never really got that interested in him. And it's nothing against that kid. I mean, it's just not what I was going to look for. So now I think the question is, how do they get to 85 by August? Because they're still 4 over. They're probably going to, it depends. There's guys that are going to make decisions in the next 24, 48 hours about their future, probably with the Iowa football program. When they've had a full spring and you're in your third year there and you really want to play and you're 4th on the depth chart, third on the third string, 4th string, you probably make some decisions.
Well, here's what I've said, and we talked with Don about this earlier, but from your perspective, Tom, because you are so in touch with the roster and with recruiting, I'm not going to make any predictions on who's going to leave or who's going to jump in the portal, but I look at a guy like Cale Vanderbush, or I look at a guy like Jaden Montgomery, Or look at a guy like Michael Myslinski. And I know his health has probably been a problem, but like I could see every one of those guys entering the portal here. Zach Tweet. Could Zach Tweet end up at UNI?
Yep.
Could Cale Crow end up at UNI? Like those are types of moves I could see happening. And then all of a sudden you're back down below the limit, maybe even with a scholarship to use.
Yeah. And those are some guys that I was poking the roster today, just kind of looking at it and thinking, oh, I got to check to see where these guys are on kind of the depth chart. And also Coach can speak to this probably better than anybody, because Coach, you can talk about this. At the end of spring ball, you probably have some frank conversations with your players like you did at the end of the year and say, look, love having you here, but there's probably not going to be an opportunity for you to play for us at any point in the future that we can see. If you want to play, maybe you should look at some other options. Coach, go ahead.
Yeah, the only real opportunity to make a move, of course, that window is just closed with today's last practice.
Yeah.
So there's not going to be any movement in terms of performance over these next few months.
Yep. Yep. And, so that's when you got to Kirk probably, or the position coach, whoever it might be, or Tim Lester or Phil Parker or somebody, sit down with a kid and just say, look, probably best if you want to carve out a meaningful football career, you can go do that somewhere else, and we'll help you find a place.
Yeah.
Devin Hilson would be another one that I'd watch. I'm not saying he's entering. I don't know where he'd go, but he's an Iowa kid.
He had two pick sixes the other day in practice.
Well, he was on the depth chart last year, and it seems like
good special teams player too.
That is true, and he was mentioned the other day by was it Kirk or LeVar about his help with punt coverage.
Yeah.
Anything else stand out to you specifically, Tom, from today?
I think there's progress on the offense. I like what Tim Lester's doing. I like the movement. I like the way that guys are kind of buying into it and the excitement that they have about the offense. I liked a little bit of the RPO looks that they would throw out there every once in a while and maybe throw off of that, where I think it was Marco had one of those where he made a nice throw and often RPO play and just stuff we hadn't seen. And I thought the run game was pretty good. Kamari Moulton, I'm interested. He looks like he's got a little juice to him. Kind of like he's not big. He's Fred Russell size, but boy, he's got some wiggle to him and good change of pace from what they have. They're loaded in that. I don't know how they're going to keep everybody happy again. I don't know how Liddell Betts did it to get all those guys back to begin with, but Caleb, you know what LeSean can do. You know what Jazz can do. Like Kamari a lot. Washington might be playing wide receiver, although that might be a position that they'd look for in the portal, is to add a wide receiver. I know Tyler Barnes has been kind of poking around a little bit, at least engaging on social media with, following some wide receivers who have hit the portal. So you kind of take notice when that happens, that he's trying to work something there. The other position I think they might have a little concern about is defensive tackle. I wonder about the depth there. What YA can do. Aaron Graves, Pittman. I got to see it more. Last year, I thought he struggled a bit in his first year getting real playing time, as a lot of players do. But beyond those top three, it's Gaffney, Jeff Bowie. I just wonder. It's too bad that Antonio Thompson left, because he would be the perfect guy.
I'm still baffled by that decision. I don't know. I'm still baffled by that.
I can't for the life of me figure out why he left. It's the same thing with Bostic leaving. It's like you are starting right now.
The only thing I would say to that, Tom, is the issues at wide receiver are so well documented.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like he's not like the first guy to do that, but there's definitely a need there. And I mean, maybe Jeff Bowie ends up, if he can stay healthy, wouldn't that be a story?
Really good story. Really good story. Local kid, from West Branch. I think it'd be awesome. But I just wonder if they've got to get in there, maybe find a guy that can just help him a little bit.
Could they maybe move Deacon Hill over?
Deacon Hill, the D tackle?
I think some people in the chat would like that, Tom.
Oh my gosh. He is. Boy, is he a lightning rod or is he a lightning? I mean, it is just.
What about listen, real quick. What about Chase Brackney? And then what about Brian Allen moving inside?
Yeah, Brian Allen has been working inside on pass rush situations. So they're kind of situationally bringing him in there. Did some of that late last year too, and I like that. And I'm a big Brian Allen fan. I think he's got a load of potential. He had a kind of a sack in air quotes today of I think it was Deacon, but I can't remember. It was Marco, and he beat Jack Dosler off the edge and got there and got the touch on him. But I think that kid's got a lot of potential. I just don't know if he's a D tackle, if he could handle that.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen anything from Chase yet. And just, it's like him and, Crawford's another one where you're kind of, Chase I get though, because he's like, this is his first spring. But Crawford's like third string. Like
Chase is a bigger guy too, right?
Yes. Yeah, he could handle playing D tackle.
Okay. A couple other things here, and then we can let you slide, Tom. But
sure.
One little, and maybe I'm just totally off, so you both can correct me if I'm wrong on this. But one little intricacy that I noticed that I thought maybe was different. I don't remember last spring. Tommy Paholski was on the roster last spring, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he really didn't get any snaps today, like until the very end.
Very end. That happened last year too.
Are you okay? All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's why I say I could be wrong on that. I thought that Paholski got more action during the course of practice last year, and is that a pretty normal thing then, walk on wise, to just kind of not really give him snaps?
Yeah, it's like you're getting the last snaps of the day. And the quarterback situation is just going to be an ongoing battle, I think. It's just, I don't know what they're going to do. They're just going to monitor that portal. I thought the portal would be pretty busy, and maybe it will pick up, but just talking to a few people about 2 weeks ago who kind of have a feel for that stuff, because generally if the portal is going to get busy, you hear about it 2 weeks before it gets busy, before it opens up, where people are already kind of making some calls behind the scenes. And what I was told was that not to expect a lot of activity in the portal I'm just talking general nationally. And that's kind of what we've seen, is that the football side has been much quieter than it probably was, except for out at Colorado with Dion. Dion's got activity.
He's always going to have activity. And let's see here. A couple comments here in the chat, Tom, that we can get you on. Andrew wants to know why Deacon Hill and Nick DeYoung are even on scholarship. That's kind of a foolish question. But anyway.
there is going to be a possibility if they are still over the number, that like the Iowa Swarm will pick up scholarships for some of those fifth-year guys or sixth-year guys like Kyler Fisher, like Nick DeYoung, players like that, where they don't count. Then they won't count against the scholarship, but they'll get that money. And that's the in case of emergency break glass situation that schools can do now. That this can happen. That's how it can work.
Don, you don't like that, do you?
No, I don't like it, because you're really just kind of thumbing your nose at the
scholarship limitations.
Scholarships, yeah.
Yep.
Schools with money can Can't have more than 85. That's what we're saying.
Well, I also don't know that I'm not that you have ultimate control over what the Swarm does with money that you donate necessarily, but I could see some people who are frustrated that they brought back a guy like Nick DeYoung. Oh, and now we have to pay for him directly because we donated. You know what I'm saying, Tom? I mean, that's going to be the narrative out there.
Well, and Nick DeYoung, to be honest, Nick DeYoung's probably not going to start. Jennings Dunker is going to start at right tackle. Nick's going to be kind of that 6th, 7th, 8th guy that can play tackle or guard. He's sort of like in baseball terms, he's like a utility man. That can come in and play multiple positions and help you out and not decimate you. That's what I think. He's not going to make or break your team. He's not going to break it either. It's just if you have problems, if you have injuries, guy you can plug in there and trust.
Casey says, "Do you think Kyler Casper transfers to Iowa?"
Be an interesting name. I don't know. I think Kevin is open to it. I think it seems like Kyler's kind of buried at Oregon and getting recruited over. But he also got a really good NIL deal that was for 4 years. So, do you want to? I don't think that type of NIL deal will be available at the University of Iowa. There will be a scholarship probably available for him, but will there be, several digits? I don't think so.
I did hear from a prominent name in college football that some of these NIL deals you hear about are not really what they're advertised to be. Yes,
100%. I mean, there was an Iowa basketball player, and the head coach at Iowa was saying he was potentially getting a deal for $500,000, and I know for certain he's not getting that much money. So not even getting half that. So it's just, but people hear those numbers and they all think that's true. Now there are some guys that are getting a bunch of money. One I thought was interesting was the Oregon State running back. They threw his number out there that he left and he was getting $400K. It was like they were just somebody with the Oregon State NIL group was just really mad that he left. And they're like, yeah, we were paying him $400,000 and he's walking away.
Well,
here's the thing that I won't do in my life. And I can promise you that if you're going to pay me $400,000, I will not leave.
Well,
unless you're going to offer me $500,000 or $1 million.
I was going to say, when I offer you $4 million to join my show full time, Tom, I can promise you that you will reconsider.
I will reconsider, but
and kind of along those lines, Copper Stacker says that Kevin Casper liked one of his tweets about successful Iowa wide receivers, so that must mean that Kyler is coming to Iowa. And,
let's hope. Let's hope. I'd love it. Kevin's a good guy. I like Kevin a lot,
and Kevin likes Iowa a lot.
Yes, yeah. But he's just stuck on that depth chart.
Yeah,
it's just not good.
And 2 more questions. James says, "How deep is Iowa at tight end?" I think they're plenty deep, assuming health.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like I say. I would be honestly, and I said I wasn't going to do this, so maybe I shouldn't, but I'm going to. Caleb Vanderbush should probably be at the very top of. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't enter the portal. Now, I don't know Cale personally, but I mean, Zach Ortworth
did he catch today?
Did he? I didn't notice.
Yeah,
that's good. That's good. I mean, opportunity, but Grant Leaper wasn't playing, and who am I missing there?
Hoffman.
Wasn't playing.
Yeah, and Hoffman. Hoffman's going to probably jump past him.
Yeah,
yeah.
And I like Michael Burt a lot coming in the summer.
Hey, Hayden Large with his neck roll.
Playing
out there a little bit of tight end too. Don, you had to like that neck roll, right?
I like the name Hayden.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Yeah. So, and then Lonnie here, a final question. Do you think Marco sticks around if Hill stays number 2? It's a good question.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope
Marco's
so.
just got to continue to develop.
Yeah.
He's a really good athlete and he can run really well. He's just got to develop more as a passer at the college level.
Yeah. And he's got.
And I saw signs of progress. I mean, I heard he struggled in practice. It's the up and down of a young quarterback. Rough practice Thursday. Today, I look decent.
I didn't think he looked maybe marginally worse than Deacon did with his arm today. Again, small sample size.
Sure.
Deacon had some horrendous throws today.
Oh, the pick that he had to Carson Shire was holy cow.
Yeah, that was incredible. But with that being said, Marco is as electric on the ground as we've seen from an Iowa quarterback since probably. I mean, I don't think it's unfair to say as electric on the ground as we've seen since Brad Banks.
Hey, Don, I got a question for you. Would you kind of game plan something if you're Tim Lester for Marco and his legs, or just something for him in every game next year to kind of throw him out there, maybe for a series or a situation where you need something?
Absolutely, because once you introduce that into your offense, all future opponents have to spend time getting ready for it.
Yep.
Maybe it was only 5% of what you did on one particular game, but they have to prepare for the possibility that it might grow to 10% or 15% next week. And so they got to spend a little bit of time preparing to defend it. I think that's smart.
You know what I suggested this week? I would just go back to the wishbone. You just go to the wishbone. We got all those backs, and you got a running quarterback like Marco.
Yeah.
I mean, Bear Switzer would love this, Don. He would love it.
Yeah.
I'd say Marco runs like he does run. I mean, we're not just like he's not like CJ Beathard, who was a good runner, but no, Marco runs like a back.
He does.
I mean, he runs like a tailback. So
we'll get a little. You remember Jamil Holloway or was it Charles Thompson, and get some Billy Sims back there. You know, that's football, right? That's some old school football. Get the bone back. Bring the wish back.
You can go back and look. Billy Sims barely made it to 100 yards against Iowa, simply because we weren't going to let him. We weren't going to let him pitch the ball to him. They can hand it to him, but we weren't going to let him pitch it to him. And the quarterback hurt us some, but we took away the pitch man, and that was smart on our part. We didn't beat him, but we gave him a scare.
Tom, I know you all your guys were there working hard today. What can people look forward to if they head over to HawkeyeReport.com?
Well, we got a bunch of stuff already. I've got Kirk's presser up, and thought Kirk was interesting today. Just general stuff, but giving us little nuggets of different things. I thought Phil Parker was terrific the other day, giving us a lot of names to watch, the Zach Lutmers of the world and guys like that maybe people weren't looking at or watching or thinking about. So, John Nestor, my man crush, John Nestor, got a love too. So, there's that was one of the other things that was interesting was the cornerbacks today, because, Harris is out, which we knew, but TJ Hall healthy and out there, and Don, the Halls real well.
I do.
And he's making a lot of progress, and Nestor over at that other cornerback position. So Deshaun Lee, who started late last year after Cooper went out. So that's something. That's something to watch. I know Bill loves Nestor.
I watched TJ with a lot of interest, and the thing that pleased me is I thought he was playing today with a lot more confidence than what I'd seen earlier in his career.
Yeah. He really battled some injury issues last year, and so I'm happy that he's healthy, because a great kid too, great family, great kid, loves being a Hawkeye. So I'm hoping maybe he gets a little bit of a breakthrough this year.
Tom Kaker to HawkeyeReport.com. Tom, thank you as always. It's always a pleasure. We'll look forward to next time.
Yes. Thanks for having me on, guys. Don, good to see you, and take care.
Thanks, Tom. All right. I always enjoy hearing from from Tom Kaker to HawkeyeReport.com. He and his guys doing great work over there, and he was at the game today as well. Let's go the quick fire on some questions. And we've got, looks like Jeff, maybe our final caller, barring something unforeseen. Jukio, Marco looks a tad bit scared when he runs. I was at the practice today and kind of noticed that. Boy, I don't agree with that. I mean, with all due respect, I thought he looked, I just think he looks natural back there. I don't know about scared.
He didn't look afraid today, in my estimation. He certainly didn't look afraid against Tennessee. As I recall, he was our leading rusher against Tennessee, and he played exactly one quarter.
Michael says, are players obligated to notify coaches that they're in contact with other teams and are considering transferring? Well, they have to be in the portal first to legally be contacted. So in a way, yes, they have to submit paperwork and enter the portal before they can technically be contacted within the rules. Gary, any comment on changes to the offense under Lester? Well, definitely go back to the beginning of this show, Gary. If you missed the first part, we talked about more motion.
Yep.
And I mean, I think in general, we heard on Thursday, and we're looking at one little window of time here during today's practice, but we heard during Thursday's press conference with Tim, a real emphasis on fundamental quarterback play. And he didn't take any shots at the previous offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, but I got the feel that, like, hey, they had to kind of rework, and they're still having to rework some fundamentals, not just with Marco, but also with Deacon. And they have a former quarterback who understands the position now.
Right. Yeah. A good adage would be, you've got to be able to walk before you can run. And I think you're right. In many ways, I think Tim felt that we got to just go back to basics here and get these guys indoctrinated so that they have better fundamentals, more consistent with what they do. It sounds simple, but it's not. And I think Tim recognizes correctly that we've just got to be better with our fundamentals, and that'll improve our throwing accuracy, and it'll improve overall aspect of play. So, it's just difficult to get it all done in 15 practices. And that's why it's so important to be able to make good use of the summer workouts. And then, of course, the all-important fall practice, preseason practice, which, of course, is in August.
Iowa Hawkeye Sports brings up a good point because it's accurate. Tim Lester said on Thursday that Marco's taking all the reps with the 2s and 3s, which is giving him more reps than Hill. And although we've talked about equal snaps against equal competition, what Tim said on Thursday made sense to me. I'm curious to get your take on that, because they don't have a third scholarship quarterback. They're getting Deacon, who's at least understands personnel, and he's been here longer than Marco. Give him the snaps, most of the snaps with the 1s, but then you are giving a heavy dose of football to Marco.
Yeah. Let's face it, I don't know how many snaps the 3s are getting in a normal practice, but those snaps could go to Pahosky, of course.
Right.
Because he would be the next available quarterback. The fact that they're giving more of those snaps to Marco simply suggests to Marco, I'm sure, we have big plans for you in the future. We just got to give you a lot of work to do between now and then to get you ready as quickly as possible. And in that regard, I don't doubt that he's ended up taking more snaps this spring than Deacon did. He simply didn't take them with the 1s. He took them with 2s and 3s.
And JT, yes, Lester did talk about having some plays specifically designed for Marco. That's one thing Lester is not going to give you, is a lack of play, ingenuity, innovation.
Right.
Something that Iowa has needed.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a zone read today one time too, where Marco kept the ball. Those are the kind of plays they would give to Marco and wouldn't even seriously consider asking Deacon to master that same play. They just have different skill set, and one is well suited to Marco, and the other quarterback is not so well suited to do the same thing.
Tyler wants to know if Tim can help Deacon with handling pocket pressure, something that he has struggled with, pocket presence, protecting the football, etc.
Yeah.
It doesn't help that he can't move.
No, it doesn't. But part of it is just awareness too. I used to have a drill that was effective in helping them to learn. I've always explained to the quarterbacks, listen, you got to be able to see the field, feel the rush. So we had a drill set up, and I was lined up where a linebacker would be. And as they dropped back, I would give them a certain number of fingers in the air. They had to tell me how many fingers were in the air. Clearly, they had to be looking at me to be able to do that at that same instant. And at the same time, you got rushers coming at them too. So they figure out over time with that kind of drill, see the field, feel the rush. And it's not easy to do that. It can be an acquired skill over time. It's the kind of thing you do need to practice. And I'm sure Tim has an idea of how to institute a similar drill as to the ones that we always used.
Tony says, nice to see you guys. How much should I overreact to all the reports from one practice? Well, that's, I know, kind of a sarcastic question. Yeah, don't overreact. One practice, and typically the offense is going to underperform. This is just a different looking offense. We're going to get a lot more, I think, out of what we see at Kids Day, I believe, once we hit middle August, and naturally so. But hopefully we've seen both quarterbacks make a jump, and hopefully there's another quarterback in the mix that, like Cade. Hopefully Cade's healthy in middle of August. They're going to need that, and then you're going to have some real healthy competition. And Jen said, how did Caleb Brown look? You made a point of saying he thought he looked good.
I thought he showed good progress. He looked very comfortable out there and made some nice catches.
Brett, thank you for the comment. Good to see Corey and Don, a.k.a. the Batman and Robin dynamic duo. Iowa football commentating heroes we need and deserve. Well, thank you, Brett. Appreciate that. Edward, tell us about punter. Ty Nissen and Reese Dakin. I would expect Dakin to win that job, but I think Ty is being given an opportunity to push him.
Yeah, and another thing that's worth mentioning, the least of our worries is place kicker, because Drew hit a 56-yarder. I think the other one barely missed from 56. Really, really solid. Of course, I've liked Drew ever since I liked him before he ever cracked his starting lineup, based on what I learned about him in the summer. So glad to know we got a reliable place kicker. And I think our punter, realizing he's a freshman, it's about as good a prospect as we can find. He'll be among the best freshman punters in the country, I'm sure.
Ex-Deegan Gambler, is the NCAA banning the hip tackle that the NFL is banning?
Good question. I don't know.
I don't know that answer that either. Rick says, it seems that Hawkeye quarterback development is painfully slow to non-existent. Coach, is this coaching or personnel? Well, remember, different guy at the helm, even though John Budmeyer could have been held responsible for some of the struggles.
Right.
Different guy at the helm, but I think you would agree with the sentiment that development, coaching, evaluations all been lacking.
Yeah, Coach Fry used to emphasize with us, and we certainly understood. He said, every coach has to be a great teacher. I've always said, we're just glorified teachers. That's what coaches are. They're simply teaching football. And you have to understand, I've got to be really, really good in being able to teach a young man of how to play the game. And it requires a lot of thought and a lot of imagination to do it as well as possible. I know it was rewarding to me to sit back and think, I got to come up with a drill to help us to be better, to overcome one particular aspect of play. And if you're a logical thinker and you take some time, you can figure out a drill. And maybe there's nothing wrong with asking another coach that you look up to for ideas on how to come up with a drill that can accomplish what you need to get accomplished. And I think that's very important that you be able to do that. Otherwise you're cheating your players.
Yeah.
You got to be a great teacher.
T. Hink says, what are your thoughts on the NCAA's new helmet communication rule and the 2-minute warning being added to the sport?
Well, I think the helmet thing is, I guess we can look at it from a competition standpoint. I'd rather not have the helmet thing because I think we have a better home field advantage than most Big Ten teams. So I'd prefer, from that standpoint, that the rule not go into effect. On the other hand, if we're playing at Ohio State, which we are, then kind of nice to not have to figure out what somebody's trying to say to you from the sideline if you can listen in your helmet itself.
And kind of a funny question. Again, we won't answer it. It's a rhetorical question. Brett says, are we still aiming for 25 points per game this year? I think if we actually do that, our defense and special teams will keep us sound and snug per usual. Boy, I'd like to think that 25 points per game is attainable.
Yeah, I think that's a realistic goal. Of course, some people thought that was a realistic goal last year.
Yeah, well,
I guess. Otherwise, they wouldn't have it in their contract. But we fell short of that. Yeah, I think that's a realistic goal. I will share with you what I shared with a good friend of mine. This was just yesterday, matter of fact, before the spring game. I said, I do think that we will show improvement on offense, but I don't want you to be unrealistic with what's going to happen. On offense, we're very definitely a work in progress. We are going to show progress. We're going to be better. And the good news, because of all those guys on defense that made a commitment to come back and play for Iowa one more year, the good news is we're going to win, in some cases, a lot like we won last year. We're going to have some ugly wins, but they're still wins. And let's just recognize that the offense is going to improve, even if the defense is not quite as good as a year ago, and it might be better. But even if it's not quite as good, it's still going to be good enough, I think.
It was pretty darn good, even without Cooper DeJean in the Big Ten championship game.
Yes, it was.
So, and then Brian says, missed a lot of this. Do you guys know when you'll be posting footage? So I will not be posting footage. Because of being in the press box, it's really not conducive to getting good footage. But I know there's footage out there, so I'll try to link that at some point, Brian. So I appreciate you being a premium subscriber, and maybe I can send that over to our premium subs. Before we get to Erica's super chat to finish things off, our final caller of the day, we've got Jeff on hold. Jeff, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Hey, I had a couple questions here. One was related to measurables. Iowa seems to always do a pretty good job of not worrying about measurables and trying to get the best guys on the field. One position that I feel like some years we get the best measurable guy on the field maybe versus the best players, and that's kind of the X receiver. Coach Patterson, could you maybe talk about maybe, we have some guys that are pretty good receivers, I think, in the roster, but it's not most of them would you say would be the X type of receiver. Like Caleb Brown is probably height and body type. He's probably more of a slot receiver. The Washington move I really like out from running back to that slot receiver, and you'd say Wetchin's probably in that type of the guys that play today. You wouldn't say that.
We lost Jeff for a second there, but maybe Jarrett Bowie fill that role. But losing Bostic and Dayton Howard's another really big guy who has flashed at times, we know.
Yeah, we lost you there for a little bit of time, but I think I understand the question. I would always caution guys, and I'll give you a prime example. Some of the best receivers I can remember in our 20 years at Iowa were not necessarily the fastest guys, but they understood how to run routes, and they caught everything. I'll take you all the way back to Billy Happel and Scott Helverson as examples. We had to be the only team in Division I football probably that had a couple of white receivers starting for them, and we were number one ranked. Did you do that? And so neither Scott or Billy Happel could run with great speed, but they both ran great routes. They understood route runners, what route runners were. Good example in the NFL. I know you remember a guy years ago, if you got any kind of age on you, you remember a guy named Fred Biletnikoff. He caught everything. He was a great route runner, and he had serviceable speed. And one way to realize that it doesn't have to always be the fastest guy in the world. Think of it this way: if you're gonna be really reliable catching a simple out route all the time, well, if you don't have great speed, they're going to try to challenge you on that out route. Except if you're a really good route runner, it means it's going to be a little bit easier for you to beat them on a double cut, on an out and go. So if you are a great route runner, then they're going to be trying to defend the out route, of course, and you'll have a better chance to beat them with the double cut. So that's a simple example that comes to mind. Billy Happel ran great double cuts, as did Scott Halverson, they had any number of chances to run them and run them effectively simply because we sometimes hurt the other team a lot with the simple underneath routes. And I hope that makes some sense to you. I think measurables can be overrated. You've heard me say before, Corey certainly heard me say, don't get hung up with the fact that all receivers need to be 6'3", because I've seen a lot of really dynamic players that were less than 6 feet. And you're making a mistake if you don't seriously consider those guys too, because they can be game breakers for you at least as well, if not better than the taller guys.
Yeah, thanks. That makes sense. One other comment I've got time I wanted to make in terms of regards to, I find this really fascinating that probably the most important person in or related to the program is Brad Heinrichs. And that person's a volunteer. And the reason I say that is, it seems like anymore now with the NIL, it's not the coaching staff, it's not development, it's not facilities, it's how much you're getting paid. And the thing that's so scary about this whole thing is he's a volunteer. If he wanted to quit and leave, his day job allows him to keep doing what we're doing. And Iowa can't necessarily hire that person because they're not connected to the university in that way. And that's frightening where we're at in college football when again, that person arguably could be the most important person related to the program because they're wheeling and dealing these deals for the current players and players that are prospective players in the future. So just like to hear some thoughts on that.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate the call.
Well, I'd like to think that a guy like Nick Saban might be able to affect change. Nick's at least in a position to talk about it. He already has talked about it some. And I think of it this way. Not even the NFL goes without a salary cap, right? The NFL has a salary cap. College football has no salary cap. How crazy is that? It's not going to last because let's face it, what makes the NFL so marketable is that on paper, at least in theory, everyone has an equal opportunity. They all have the same budget to work with. And just as we also all had 85 scholarships, why in the world would we upset what was such a good working model for us? And somebody's got to be able to affect enough change at a high level. Maybe it's I hate to think it somehow ties into Washington, D.C., but maybe at some point the federal government gets involved even to restore the game to some sense of order, because it's ridiculous to think that you can have as many good players as you want to buy. And I guess we heard earlier in the show today, you can have 85 counters and you can have other guys that are playing for you, but we're not going to count them simply because we're out of scholarships. We're just going to give them their money rather than have them earn it.
Simple solution is you just have to change the number of guys on your roster, right? You have to be able to, you don't have to enforce whether NIL can pay it, but you just have to say, well, we have this limit for total number of players. What's the total number? What's the roster limit right now?
I don't know that there is one.
Okay, then that would be the first thing. You got to have a roster limit, right? Which limits how many walk-ons you can have, but so be it.
But the sad part
there's still a discrepancy. I get it.
One of the neat aspects of the game is even if nobody thought you were worthy of a scholarship coming out of high school, you can still prove them wrong.
Well,
by going to a school and earning that scholarship.
Then some of the best walk-ons will be coming to places like Iowa who won't be paying, Anyways, good stuff, Jeff. Thank you for the call. And Erica, to finish this thing off, we've been here for 2 hours. Erica wants a final farewell as it relates to a Hayden Fry story. Do you have a Hayden Fry story for us? Do you have a Hayden Fry story from a spring practice?
Not from a spring practice that comes to mind, but here's a good one, I think. This is a story that Coach Fry told and that I told to my team too. It's a good motivational story, and it actually applies to things other than football. And the story goes something like this. Let's just talk about a little village over in the Himalayan mountains and a very primitive culture within that little village. And there was one man that didn't live in the village. He lived on the nearby mountain. And everybody in that village knew if they had a big decision, the thing they needed to do is make a trek up that mountain to talk to the wisest man in the village, the one that everybody respected. Except this young guy decided, I think I'm smarter than he is. So I'm going to come up with a plan to prove that I'm smarter than he is. And he did come up with that plan. The plan was something like this. The plan was, and he had his little entourage with him to make the trek up the mountain to go to the wise man up on the hill. And the plan was to show up with a bird behind his back, in his hand, behind his back. And his challenge to the wisest of all men was, I have a bird in my possession, behind my back. Is that bird alive or dead? And his thought process, of course, is the bird's alive at this moment in my hand, but if the wise man says it's dead, then I'll simply present him the live bird. On the other hand, if he says he's alive, I'll squeeze the life out of the bird and present him with a dead bird. What do you think the wise man's response was? My son, it is in your hands. Make it as you wish. That's a good story, because the same thing can be said for a college football player that was given an opportunity at school X, Y, or Z. It is in your hands. Make it as you wish. And the point is, it has so much to do with you and your commitment and your dedication. And who's to say that you're not going to be able to outwork those guys at your position and accomplish more than what any of them could imagine? That's the challenge for so many that relates to that particular story. That's one of my favorite stories, because I think it really applies to everything you can think of. It applies to, people reporting to a new job. Maybe you're a truck driver in a big trucking firm, but you're unproven. So what do? You just demonstrate by your work ethic and your commitment that you can do the job better than anyone else. And I think that's a worthwhile story.
A little bit gruesome, but
not gruesome.
Squeezing a bird, but
yeah.
To each his own. I get that. It's a great illustration, and
yeah, it's not politically correct, maybe, but it was a good story back in the day.
Would he get away with saying? Would someone get away with saying that in front of a microphone?
I think PETA might come after you. Is that who would?
Somebody would. Some organization.
Would. Yeah.
Human rights or animal rights. So, anyways, all right, folks. Appreciate everybody being here. Don, it's been a pleasure as always. Thank you for taking the time on a cold April day. Again, spring practice is now complete. The football team next period will be the summer conditioning period. And so that'll lead us all up to fall camp. If you've not already done so, folks, please scroll down and hit the like button. That does help us immensely. Please hit that little thumbs up button that just popped up there. Hit that little thumbs up button below this video. Tell your friends about what we're doing. If you want to donate, there's a message there across the bottom of your screen, links for Venmo, Cash App, PayPal. Also, ways you can support through our description with a merchandise purchasing, shopping Amazon and our Amazon store, and a number of other ways. So it's been a pleasure talking to everybody. I will be back with you tomorrow with more content. For Don Patterson, I'm Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Have a good Saturday. We'll talk to you soon.